1965 to 1978, Project Serpo, Human Alien Exchange Program, Part 11. The following story is either the greatest kept secret of all time or a complete fraud. You decide. In this episode, we find out about the untimely death of a team member. This presentation is of the information posted on the website, serpo.org, from a retired senior government official. The website was intended to facilitate the gradual release of confidential documents pertaining to a top-secret exchange program of 12 U.S. military personnel to Serpo, a planet of Zeta Reticuli, between the years 1965 to 1978. 5.3 Problems. Our scientists could not understand how the orbit of Serpo could revolve around the two suns at the distance measured. In the end, our scientists found that some things relating to that particular system was different in physics compared to our system. There were some questions about how our team measured the orbit and other calculations based on the lack of a stable time base. For some reason, and I don't think this was ever determined, our time instruments did not work on Serpo. Now, considering this, you can understand the difficult job our team members had making calculations without time. They had to come up with an alternate method to measure speeds, orbits, etc. Challenge: try solving a problem in physics without being able to measure time on Earth. So you see, our team did the best they could with the instruments they had and the hardships they developed attempting scientific calculations. It is difficult for any Earth-based scientist to understand the different physics in other solar systems or on other planets. One question involved Kepler's law of planetary motion. Our team had that information. We had some of the best military scientists on the team, but if you consider Kepler's law, it requires time, and our team could only measure time in the conventional way. It was determined that Kepler's law did not apply to that solar system. So, one of the things our Earth-based scientists learned was not to apply Earth's laws of physics in a universal way. Serpo was estimated to be about 3 billion years old. The two suns were about 5 billion years old, but only by estimation. Although our team spent over a decade, our time, on Serpo and nearby planets, they did not have a laptop computer to enter all the data. They had two recorders who were responsible for writing down the data. Our team acknowledged that a lot of data was lost or not documented. Regarding time, the team members brought several timepieces, examples, wristwatches, non-battery style, as it stated in the debriefing data. The timepieces worked, but they had no reference to time. Since the even days were longer, the dusk and dawn periods were longer, and they had no calendars to reference. They did use the timepieces to calculate movement, for example, timing the movement of the even two suns. They also calculated the time between work and rest periods. But after a while, the team discarded their timepieces and used the Evans measurement of time periods. The team became confused with the calendars they brought. It was a 10-year calendar. After 24 months, the team lost track of time as to the calendar since they could not properly calculate days compared to Earth days. They set up one large clock to the Earth time when they left. However, this was a battery-controlled clock, and when the battery died, the clock stopped, and they forgot to change the battery in time. Consequently, they lost the Earth time. The team brought a large quantity of batteries, but they ran out after about 5 years. The Ebens had no comparable item, like batteries. They also took electric razors, coffee pots, electric heaters, a DIM. No explanation as to what this was, an electric IBM typewriter, a scientific calculator, slide rules, both conventional and scientific, base data collection recorder, 3 different sized telescopes, tangents, both conventional and electrical. The list goes on and on, but they took about everything they were allowed to take as to weight. The Ebens did weigh the equipment taken by our team. The weight limit was 4.5 tons, or 9,000 pounds. As for food, the team took sea rations, military style. They carefully planned for 10 years. Selected team members carried small containers of liquid nitrogen. Ebens were vulnerable to extreme cold. In case the Ebens turned hostile, the liquid nitrogen could be used to neutralize Ebens. During an escape attempt, the team members were instructed to spray the substance directly into the face of an Eben. EB1 was found to be vulnerable to this. As for the liquid nitrogen, it was placed in special containers, just like we do today. The debriefing document doesn't state the type of containers, just that each member had a small container. However, during the return debriefing, the team found the Ebens to be so docile, each team member quickly discarded these bottles of liquid nitrogen. When they arrived on Serpo, the Ebens realized the team had the substance, but never questioned the reason for bringing it. As with weapons, each team member had a handgun and rifle. The Ebens realized these were weapons, but again never questioned why the team members were bringing them along. But each team member never carried the weapons, except during their exploration of Serpo, and then only certain team members carried them. Humans could make the Eben tonal sounds, but one had to practice and practice and practice. It took a long time for anyone studying the Eben language to make the sounds. Some of the sounds were similar to high-pitched singing sounds. The bottom line is that it could be done. Now consider this. Even though each team member was taught the Eben tonal sounds and language, it was difficult for the team members to remember each tone and the use of other sounds with the tones. The two linguists on the team practiced and learned enough to basically communicate. According to the documents I read, the Ebens learned English, but had difficulty pronouncing words exactly correct. For example, according to the document, Ebens could not say the letter L. So, if the Ebens were trying to say the word look, it came out book. Between the first messages sent by our Earth-based team in the summer of 1952 to the first message received from the Ebens was about 4 months. We have no way of knowing when the Ebens received our message, how long it took them to study it, and how long it took them to send it back. The signals were in Eben language, with a readout and sounds, tonal, etc. There was one Eben who was a space traveler, and who could speak English better than the other Ebens who had learned it. This Eben was codenamed Noah by the team. Every time the team had to communicate important information, they turned to Noah. But during the latter part of our team's stay, Noah left for an away mission. By then, our two linguists were able to communicate better than any other team member. Our team had the Eben communication device with them, but it contained only about 500 English words. Not enough to fully communicate. The team discarded the device early in their stay. It took our linguist specialists several years to adequately establish a form of communication with the Ebens. A group of Ebens learned to understand English and a few other Earth languages. This group contained the travelers, as our team called them. Our team members connected themselves with the travelers. Although the team couldn't always understand their responses, the Eben travelers understood our team most of the time. During this time period, the only exchange of information was simple. The Ebens, not being able to completely explain something to our team, used a form of sign language by pointing to the object or item they wished to explain, and made hand movements. Our team, 2 members, eventually grasped that method of communication. However, our team didn't receive much information from the Ebens during this time period. The travelers, the very few who understood English, numbered about 30, did not fully understand all words in our language. Later, the Ebens called our language too complicated and difficult to understand. We eventually determined the Eben tonal language to be very complicated and extremely hard to translate. We were able to record their language and then play it back, listening to each tonal dialect and each tonal bar. Eventually, we crudely translated some of the language. We started with simple items, for example, the flying object that they used to travel around their planet on. Then things like houses, roads, food, clothing, their sons, their planet, etc. Although we did establish some form of communication, it was crude and not always helpful for our team when something complicated happened. For example, When one of the first team died in an accident, it was hard to communicate with the Ebens. The member died instantly, therefore, no medical care was provided. Our two doctors examined the member's body and determined the injuries were consistent with an accidental fall. Initially, the Ebens never interfered with our care or offered to provide any of their medical care. However, once the Ebens, a very benevolent and caring people, saw our team members crying, the Ebens stepped in and offered to attempt some sort of medical care. Although our doctors felt the team member was medically dead, they allowed the Ebens to try their own medical care. Most of this was either through sign language or speaking to the travelers, who could understand some English. The Ebens transported the team member's body to a remote area of the largest community. They took the body into a large building, apparently their hospital or medical center. The Ebens used a large examination table to view the body. The Ebens ran a large bluish-green light beam over the body. The Ebens watched a display that appeared on a large screen that looked like a television screen. The readouts were in the Eben written language, and thus our team could not understand it. However, there was a graphic display, similar to a heartbeat graph. The solid line was not wavering. Our doctors understood that meant the same thing that their equipment measured. The heart was not beating. The Ebens administered some liquid through a needle. This was done several times. Eventually, the heart started beating, but our doctors knew the internal organs of the body were damaged but couldn't fully explain that to the Ebens. The Ebens finally made a sign, placing both their hands to the chest and bowing their heads. Our team members knew that meant the body was dead and nothing could be done. The Ebens showed affection to our team. During the last work period, the Ebens had a ceremony for the dead team member, the same ceremony used when an Eben died. Our team held their own service, attended by the Ebens. The Ebens were extremely curious about our religious service. One team member, who was acting as a minister, performed a death service. Our team was eternally grateful for the Ebens' caring attitude for our dead friend. 5.4 Conclusions. Regarding the reason why some team members remained, the debriefing reported that the team members who remained did so voluntarily. They fell in love with the culture of the Ebens and the planet. They were not ordered to return. Communication with the remaining crew members lasted until about 1988. No other communication was received from those team members. The two who died on the planet Serpo were placed in coffins and buried. Their bodies were returned to Earth. Each team member received a large dose of radiation during their stay on Serpo. Most of the team members died later of radiation-related illnesses. President Bill Clinton wanted to continue the exchange program, but others in his administration thought it would be a mistake and overruled him. It was terminated in 1994 with the B-5. All surviving team members were carefully monitored and watched by a special branch of the DIA. The last surviving team member died in 2002 in the state of Florida. Source: Serpo.org via Maurice Osborne. My take: it's a little bit sad that the adventure of a lifetime caused the early death of all the team members involved. So far, we have not heard anything about the Ebens that were left here on Earth. I wonder what happened to them. Stand by, and we shall see what is next.